everyone, welcome to the Open Grand Finals of the 21st Premchand. A couple of housekeeping rules. Please don't disturb the speaker. Please put your phones on mute. And please don't hoot during the speeches and whatnot, because it creates a lot of disturbance and we won't be able to hear the speaker. So on count, we have no framing plus vibes. Introduction of the panel then. My name is Rebuttal. I'll be the chair for this round. With me on panel.
Hey guys, Divyansh, him. Looking forward to a great debate.
Hello, Naman, no preferred pronoun. Have fun with this.
Harshi, good luck.
Gauri, no preferred pronoun. All the best.
Alright, with that, the Prime Minister.
YouTube पे जाओ.
Standard task 167. Good task 5+7. Right. Switch yourself, prefer gender pronouns he him. I'll be giving myself a counter and then I'll be giving my speech. 3, 2, 1. Panel 3 points of framing and why each of them individually are important before I go on with the specific impacts and analysis for our case, right? Number 1, what does emotionally distancing looks like? Panel emotionally distancing looks like when you can distance yourself emotionally from a person, but you can still objectively evaluate that person and the acts of that person. Why does that become important in the context of this debate? Essentially, this means that no argument whatsoever can come from the side op where they say that, oh, it is going to be used by victims and then victims will no longer be able to call out their oppressors. At the same time, no arguments can be made that, oh, look, the aggressors are going to take the pill and no longer associate with their crimes and will not feel any regret, right? Just because of taking the pill, it only allows you to emotionally distance yourself. In no way, shape or form can you, will you stop objectively evaluating the good or the bad of your act. Second line of framing, who are you more likely to take the pill towards, right? Panel, we believe on our side of the house that on the balance of probability, it is highly likely that you are taking the pill towards someone you are in direct contact with, right? What does this look like? Panel, if I am driving rashly and some driver who is also driving rashly shouts at me, you impotent bastard, fuck off, I am likely to be pissed, but I am not likely to be emotionally traumatized or hurt by it. On the other hand, if my girlfriend of 5 years tells me you're an important bastard, fuck off, that's likely to hurt me much more. I'm likely to be traumatized, and it's likely to take me much longer period of time to get over it, right? Of course, assuming that she breaks up with me after that. Third line of framing, this house prefers motion. What does this mean? This means that this pill is already existing in this world, right? It's not like it did not exist before and suddenly it has come to exist. Why is this important in today's debate? No, not right now. Why is this important in today's debate panel? Because understand that side opposition can make no argument that it is the societal structures existing in society that prevent you from emotionally distancing yourself. Because when we say that this pill has existed since eons, essentially it means that the societal structures consequently have also not been in existence, right? Having already fleshed out these 3 key framing points, what are the 2 metrics on which we believe today's debate will be judged? Number 1, on which side of the house is quality of life and happiness better off, and number 2, which side of the house is agency better off. Having fleshed this out, what are the impacts exclusive on our side of the house on the basis of which we will win this debate? Number 1, impact on self. There are 3 levels of analysis on which the impacts on self are better on our side of the house. Alright. Number 1, an additional level of hurt is immediately lost. This is fairly intuitive, I believe. coming with my girlfriend example, it's, on one side it's going to take me 6 years to get over it. I'm going to have to spend money in therapy, I'm going to have to spend time in therapy. On the other hand, I can just take a pill, which is fairly free and accessible. There is no minority argument to learn that, oh look, minorities will not be getting it, yada yada yada. Anyone can access the pill, immediately get over any emotional trauma or angst, right? Therefore, that additional level of hurt that is happening in the status quo world, where you're taking a long period of time to necessarily get over some previous traumatic event that has happened in your life, immediately gets minimized, and you're ready to move on with your life. You're ready to bounce back and actually start rebuilding your life. So, the second level of analysis, the ability to retrust grows, right? Again, see, I have gone through a terrible breakup. Now I don't have the ability to love someone again, because when someone who I really trusted has suddenly broken my trust, it is very intuitive that I will stop trusting at least for a significant period of time after that, right? And what does this mean? It will not only impact the relationship which is already destroyed, but it will also impact future and subsequent relationships in my life. Therefore, this on our side of the house, we see that while our present relationship may have gotten affected for reasons beyond our control, our future relationships at the very least will not get affected and will be better off on our side of the house. Third level of analysis, cognitive dissonance or self-esteem. Understand, panel, that when any traumatic event happens in anyone's life, they are extremely likely to think at least to themselves, was I the one to blame, right? And even if they were not the ones to blame, if they were the ones to blame, this even taking the pill allows you to objectively evaluate your actions. But assuming that you were not the ones to blame, this later. Assuming you were not the one to blame, even then a cognitive dissonance happens within you, which leads to a loss of self-esteem. On our side of the house, the loss of self-esteem is much better off. You know that you've been hurt, you know you've been traumatized, but upon taking the pill, you're no longer hurt or traumatized. You still want to move on, you still want to see your fucking girlfriend again, but at the end of the day, at least you're not traumatized and hung up over, right? The second point of analysis, impact on self-doubt. Ability to opt out of oppressive social structures where the oppressors are the ones close to you. This is very important. What does this look like? I feel that the propensity to tolerate abuse is much more from people who are close to me, right? And if someone on side opposition comes up and slaps me, I will not tolerate it. But if someone who has known for 20 years slaps me, I am much more likely to tolerate it, right? And what does this look like? Your propensity to take much more shit from someone who's closer to you than someone who's not close to you. Because of these narratives in the status quo world, the good daughter narrative, the good wife narrative, where you are expected to conform to certain pre-decided social structures, right? So therefore, parents say you have an abusive father, an abusive uncle, an abusive husband, you are likely to just tolerate their abuse too, because you feel that you are not conforming to the pre-decided social structures and you become a bad wife or a bad daughter. This is why parent divorces are often very messy, and this is why that divorces often end up with the wife taking far less than she would have decided. Question.
What do you exactly mean by divorcing emotional objectivity with objective evaluation? How are these two things any different?
Very fair question. Understand, panel, that let's say my girlfriend of 20 years is broken up, or I think that's too long of a time frame. Let's say my girlfriend of 5 years is broken up with me today, right? Now, I am evaluating her actions while simultaneously balancing it with the heartbreak I feel, with the angst I feel, with the other emotions I feel, right? I am not objectively evaluating my breakup or the actions that led to my breakup. Whether it was my fault, whether it was her fault, whatever it may be, there is no objective evaluation that went on me. What does this look like? Even in more extreme cases such as marital rape, what it looks like is it's very difficult to divorce the emotional for the objective. Because at the end of the day, panel, a wife who has been raped by her husband, in often cases in developing countries like India, will say, hey look, he's still my husband, I still love him, I'm still beautiful to him, so let me not do anything. But on our side of the paradigm panel, when we tell you that, hey look, we have this ability to opt out of oppressive social structures because we don't need to take this abusive shit from people close to us, right? That propensity for abuse is not so high on our side of the house. What does this look like? In the best case, panel, we distance ourselves, we form better social structures, yada yada. Even in the worst case, there's no politicization. Understand, panel, that now that I am not wanting to take abuse from people close to me, I am not influenced by these external loci and these external factors. It is likely to lead to politicization. I am likely to know what I want, what is best for me, and is likely to lead to the creation of a vote bank. Understand, panel, that a vote bank like this for women would look like this world where even the political majority are likely to engage with them. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the parents for their faculty regarding the I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the person that you are is accumulation of experiences that you have, the ups and downs that you experience in your life all along is what leads to self-actualization at the end of the day. I want to frame out a few things within this debate before going ahead. First, the idea is that, emotional evaluation can be done on objective metrics. This is something which is contradictory to each other because every time you have to go ahead and evaluate something based which is hinged on emotions, you have to go ahead and take some emotional characteristics or some emotional quotient into account. We don't think so. There are objective metrics by evaluating your friendship with other person or by evaluating your relationship towards other person at all points in time to begin with. But second, their idea then is that, if the person is assaulted, you can simply pop the pill and forget about what has happened, thereby you don't go through that trauma. We think so insofar as you don't go ahead and take that pill on our side of the house, the anger that you have, the experience that you go through necessarily pushes for impetus to go ahead and push back against these structures, try to go ahead and revolt against these people at all points in time, but also access other forms of help at all points in time in terms of accessing courts or police stations for domestic help, etc. on our side of the house. This never happens on their side. There's a constant assault that happens on their side of the house because the perpetrator never realizes that there was any fault of theirs at the end of the day because there's no resolution mechanism or solvency on their side of the house to begin with. But secondarily, what does this emotional distancing essentially look like? I want to nuance a bit further. One, we think so that essentially means that you no longer feel emotionally affected by what that person necessarily did to you. But second, the experiences that you shared with that person becomes irrelevant for you at all points in time to begin with. But third, you forget about the time that you have essentially spent with that person at all points in time. That is something which means nothing for you at the end of the day, even if that's a suffering or that's a guilt of experiences that you have had at the end of the day at all points in time to begin with. But second, why is this pill a low-hanging fruit for people to go ahead and opt into on their side of the house to begin with? No, they already concede to the fact that this is largely accessible to people and free to people. At that point in time, we think so there's a lack of deterrence that exists for people to not opt into it. It becomes the low-hanging fruit for people to go ahead and easily take this pill and have it as picked up so that they can probably not go through that pain, not go through that experience or time that is needed to move on from different situations and difficult situations at the end of the day to begin with. But second, we think so that the other alternatives that necessarily exist within society to go ahead and move on are largely prolonged, thereby they want to go ahead and cut the chase of spending more time in terms of trying to move on and rationalizing the problem that necessarily exists. Thus, they're likely going to go ahead and take this pill on their side of the house to begin with. What alternatives essentially look like on our side of the house in terms of moving on? Why do they essentially work? That essentially looks like things like therapy, religion, gaming, debating, other activities that you can probably opt into, your social group, your friends, family, etc. Why are these things also accessible for you to go ahead and opt into if you want to go ahead and move on from a certain difficult situation on our side of the house to begin with? One, we think so that religions are on the rise at all points in time to begin with. They are going ahead and being propagated through media at all points in time. They have free meditation centers, free meditation classes that are being propagated. Thereby, you can go ahead and always use religion as a means of resort to go ahead and self-rationalize the problems that necessarily exist with you. But second, we think some mental health activism is also on the rise on our side of the house to begin with. It has literally become a part of NHS welfare funding, but there's government going ahead and giving out funding for you to go ahead and make therapy really accessible to people and have greater democratization of therapy as well, right? But third, we think so that capitalism always have incentive to go ahead and make all of these things accessible for people. Why is this true, right? One, they want the workforce to go ahead and come back for them to go ahead and work as soon as possible. But second, they go ahead and monetize therapy. At that point in time, they want repeat customers, so they can't keep entry barriers too high. They have to keep their prices really low so that people can go ahead and opt into these things at all points in time to begin with. If government wants to go ahead and push forward for that, alternatives on opt essentially look like bad things like weed and smoking, etc. Why is that not the case, right? One, we think so there's a social stigma that necessarily exists for people to go ahead and opt into these kinds of alternatives essentially. But second, there's greater social awareness that exists pertaining to these things as to why they are bad for our mental health, but also why is it bad for our physical health as well. Therefore, we don't think so people go ahead and resort to these things if they want to go ahead and move on. What is the efficacy of these kind of alternatives on our side of the house to begin with? We think so when do you start appreciating things in your life? You start appreciating things when you go ahead and go through loss. When you go ahead and you see losses in your life at all points in time, that's when you go ahead and appreciate the highs of your life at all points in time to begin with. That essentially looks like when you lose your parent, when you lose your parent, that's when you recognize the value of life, primarily because you see that life is largely unpredictable. You should have spent much more time with your loved ones. You should have appreciated what they did for you at all points in time. When you go ahead and go through a breakup, that's when you go ahead and recognize the fact that you should have valued your relationship a bit more. You should have spent much more time with your partner at all points in time to begin with. When you go ahead and lose a debate, that's when you realize the other things that you have achieved in life is something which gives much more meaning to what you have done in your life at all points in time. The other debate that you probably won was something which needed to be valued a little bit more instead of going ahead and crimping about those things at all points in time to begin with. At that point in time, we think so that losses are necessary for you to go ahead and value those things. What happens on our side of the house to begin with? We think so that every time you go ahead and lose something, you spend time with that grief to go ahead and evaluate what went wrong at all points in time to begin with. You go through the 5 stages of grief. You go ahead and mentally start appreciating every incremental progress that you make in your life from your day-to-day well-being at all points in time to begin with. At that point in time, you go ahead and try to find the root cause of those issues that might have led to different outcomes within your life and within those situations at all points in time to begin with. You then move into stages of introspection at all points in time to begin with. You go ahead and evaluate what triggered the problem, what went wrong, etc. Right? However, on a comparative, you never reach that stage of grief or introspection because the first result that you have is to go ahead and pop this pill at all points in time to begin with. It leads to a stage of linear happiness and linear growth on their side of the house to begin with because you don't have your lows to appreciate the highs that you have in your life at all points in time to begin with. At that point in time, the only way that you can go ahead and achieve happiness and instant gratification is to go ahead and opt into things which are largely inaccessible to you or things that are being sold by capitalistic structure at all points in time to begin with. That essentially looks like, oh, if you have a big house, you'll be happy. If you have a fancy luxury car, you'll become happy, etc., etc. We think so this is something which becomes your aspiration on their side of the house to begin with because you don't have smaller things to go ahead and appreciate too on their side of the house to begin with. And these things are largely inaccessible because people don't have the money to go ahead and buy these things. But second, we think entry barrier to these things is largely high, but this is something which is sold as lucrative to you on their side of the house to begin with. How do you grow as an individual on our side of the house? We think so that the growth of an individual is contingent on the ups and downs that you experience in your life. You keep going ahead and making mistakes on our side of the house and you learn from those mistakes eventually. Insofar as on their side of the house, you pop a pill every time you go through a breakup, you never realize what went wrong in that relationship. And you keep committing those mistakes in your future relationships as well, right? Thus your relationships never get better. On our side of the house, even if it's prolonged in terms of the suffering that you have, we are fine with it because you value what went wrong. You don't commit those mistakes in the future. You're much more empathetic to the people that you are interacting with in the future at all points in time. Even on scale, we think so empathy is much more better than going ahead and having instant gratification.
Hi, am I audible? Guys, am I audible, everyone? I have to shut the fan down. Sorry. Where is the guys, can start? Are you ready? 3, guys. 3, 2, 1. Coming to a similar largest problem on opposing ventures that they have misunderstood what emotional distancing means. Which means at no point in time do people lose their sense of self, their sense of justice, the sense of what gives them happiness. Objective events which give them happiness, objective events which give them sadness. To them, happiness and emotional distancing somehow means that the growth will only be linear, and at no point in time will you be able to sort of appreciate or distinguish the bad person with the bad thing and the happiness that came or the loss that came out of it. This is a simple case on, I think, side government, right? We can, this thing distances you from the bad things the person has done, from that person, the bad, not the event that gave you objective happiness. Which means, if objectively you can evaluate that your marriage had some good points, but you had an abusive husband, so you take the pill, the abusive husband part goes away, the hurt goes away, and what remains are the memories of good marriage, but also not memories. The objective evaluation, your sense of justice, your sense of self, that these things are objectively happy, they make me happier, and those are things I further want to do. And I think this is the singular push that comes in terms of happiness somehow being linear. Okay, you know what, we really don't understand that what is the problem, because they say that somehow experiences in life is supposed to be complex, in which there is a compulsory burden on the individual and the trauma survivor to work their way through that grief. What happens in cases where this grief is unworkable? Allow me to give you 3 frames of analysis, 0 engagement from their side of the house, or why you need a frame of the visit. But before that, they say, oh, this means that you will stop accessing debate rooms because you will not engage in like hobbies that help you come up with grief. We're okay with that. If the net gain means that I can take the pill, do away with my sadness, I'll absolutely do that, and I'll not move on to X, Y, and Z activities. I'll still debate because I like debating as an activity, but I won't look towards debating as a placebo of sorts. Oh, debating, great, please come here and heal me. We really don't understand it. But also, like things like weed. Guys, weed is not an example in part of this debate. Irrelevant metrics on narcotics, X, Y, and Z. Please don't buy any of that. Let's just qualify what we even mean by that sort of framing and argument. Capitalist structures, exclusive on both sides of the house. Please come here and explain someone to me. Substantive case, 5 things we told you. Firstly, on ability. We think the ability to do things really increases, which means me as a person, and they've really not contested the frame. In fact, they've agreed that the person who are most likely to harm to are people who are like close around us. Which means the ability to make that unpopular career choice vis-a-vis my parents, the ability to opt into my gender identity and express myself is one that's greatly increased on this side of the house. Because of course, my parents don't support me financially on either sides, but at least I don't end up self-blaming myself in those circumstances, because I realize that after emotionally distancing myself from my parent, what I have is the net happiness in experiencing my gender identity, in experiencing like a stream of commerce or arts which my parents were in level of support to. But also in terms of victims, right? Total non-engagement on this side of the house. We think that victims are like really people who have to invest years in therapy, burgeoning through slow progress, money, X, Y, and Z. Point at which when I can simply recover from the like trauma this person has given me by taking a pill, I can invest that time on my own self in terms of like getting a job, my like sort of like managing my life, my career, X, Y, and Z things. Which means that the burgeoning linear progress they talk to you about is like so hard on people who have really gone through this trauma that it's extremely unlikely that 7, 8, 10 years which get lost are things that people can simply make up. One bad divorce takes about 35 years from your life, because till like 35 years you're still thinking, was I being the bad wife, was I being the bad daughter? But I think additionally, I think they've lost this debate on terms of impact, right? I think we're fairly clear. How does radical action, politicization come about? It comes about in a society where a society has objectively told you, please don't be a bad daughter, please don't be a bad wife, please don't do things that annoy people. Oh, you know, you are really so ungrateful for like refusing sex to your husband, quote unquote. Point at which where I can pop the pill and I can get out of this blame. I can objectively look that, oh, this is the problem, my husband has hurt me in a number of ways. And once this is a group process, 100 other women, 100 other minorities sort of take this pill and pop this action again. We say that, oh, radical action, politicization, things like this happen on our front. Because our stakeholder now knows it was the person at fault and their objective sense of justice, their objective sense of happiness, which has pushed them towards certain, these events are one which still remains intact. Zero engagement on their side of the house. But then let's like really take it further, right? We think the ability to retrust people. Here you get direct engagement with what they say, like new relationships, like you really will not be able to form because old ones never work. See, this is the problem, right? I think they really confuse the metric to point at which, okay, and we agree that this pill is like widely accessible, right? And this is what people end up taking. First we say that, guys, come on, no. Okay, wait. It's 4:27. I'll just take 5 more seconds. So 4:24. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. But in terms of like retrusting people, right? They say that somehow like this retrust is going to be good. We've exactly told you your ability to retrust people is one which is extremely high on our side of the house. And why is that the case? Because now X, Y, and Z you've had a bad experience. Now you go ahead and take a pill, and it's no more a deterrent in thinking, oh, my next relationship is also going to be failure. So that amount of liberty you have on the side of the house in which you can go ahead and take that pill and like sort of like retrust people. But I think working through your like relationships, and their simple game is people will not work through their relationships because now they are simply going to take the pill in the first instance. That's objectively untrue. This is an insurance policy when things go wrong. If you're really in love, you really want to make it work out, those are instances in which those individuals will work towards those common goals. But what happens when things don't work in this linear fashion, right? We all have that like one love like which was like never sort of like given back to us, right? What happens in cases like those? So when there's common will, when like societal factors are to your benefit, you of course work to the best of your ability to sort of get these things. But worst case, you get harmed, you get hurt again, please pop the pill, feel free, like feel better next time, and like start like sort of like dating people again. If you go out again, like please go and we kindly take the pill again. So the absolute utility that we have been sort of providing you in terms of immediate harm of you not getting hurt, zero engagement. But also I think in terms of like additional hurt, right? I think they've really missed the point that the quantum and type of grief that is happening to me is not road rage. It's not like depersonalized. It's like really emotionally identity, your parents, your sister, your father, X, Y, and Z, and forms of cultural relation. Which means this sort of grievous hurt is unlikely to heal simply by saying that please go through therapy X, Y, and Z. Which means the value outcome that you can generate while you're tackling them head on and by simply taking the pill, while working on yourself, trying to find a job, these things are extremely high on the side of the house. But then let's really understand what happens to those who refuse to take this pill, right? I think this is how larger narratives also change. So for people who don't take the pill, how do media narratives look like? Now media narratives stop the compulsory sort of romanticization of the narrative. Oh, that there's this one love, you have to get back one love, because now you live in a world already, you prefer to live in a world where this pill exists, and this romanticization of the past, looking at these dicey, juicy things from a very romantic lens is no more accepted. So larger narratives also start to coming around. So fine, okay, you always have a world, you can always going to sort of go and take the pill, but the cue that this gives to things like media narratives, social narratives happen to be specifically the cue that, oh, you know what, romanticization of the dicey past is really not the thing, and now we're going to talk about objective facts and metrics. But I think that this is really something that we're really into that clarify on what is the method of this debate. Just imagine this. There are people who are badly, severely emotionally hurt because their parents have refused their career choice, their gender identity, X, Y, and Z. They still have an objective lens at looking at that, oh, was it my fault? Was it not my fault? Oh, my parents are the wrong ones who have wronged me in this manner. But what is no more stopping them is the conflicted love they feel towards their parents, in which they're unable to do those sort of things. You get clear, radical, precise action because now people clearly understand this is what hurt me, and irrespective of my father or mother, we go against that.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. They have one argument. This is about abuse. I will give multiple ways to respond to this. The first idea which they have that you have to objectively look at an abuse relationship in the first place. This is a non-starter. So if you want to be emotionally connected to your husband and your father and your mother, you would not take the pill in the first place because you will be emotionally distant to them. So the problem is they have is that you are emotionally attached to them, and that is why you do not want to evaluate it. Sure, you value that emotional attachment, that's why you are still in that relationship. If you value that emotional attachment, you would not take the pill in the first place anyway. This argument is a non-starter. But secondly and more importantly, or abuse them. The first thing to note in this abuse argument, that if it's true that these people can manipulate you to the extent that they force you to stay in the relationship, they can also manipulate you to not take the pill in the first place. Because if you are conflicting between your own emotions that should you be in the relationship or not, they are also conflicted about taking the pill in the first place. You necessarily do not take the pill on their part. But lastly and more importantly, I necessarily don't understand what is the way of you looking at a relationship objectively. You cannot, because you have to ensure that these are things which are extremely personal to you. Why? Because you have to admit that you were wrong. You have to admit that person who you love necessarily cheated on you, or necessarily didn't believe in you, or did something which necessarily hurt you. All those things create an extreme emotional tone on you. So if you're emotionally distant to it, you cannot look at it objectively, because you cannot track what you did emotionally wrong. Were you not available to them? Were you not available when they were particularly sad? Did you not understand their feelings? There's no objective metrics reason why a particular relationship didn't work. They don't work because of multitudes of factors, how people interact with each other. There is no objective way of looking at these things. You need to take an emotional toll so that you have to take it seriously, and that's when everything else kicks in, right? The moment you face a breakup and then get into a relationship, you're happier because you went through that breakup in the first place, and that is why you value it. And that's the argument is the necessary miss completely coming from Lavanya. What does Lavanya tell you, and what is the metric of this debate? If this metric of this debate is happiness, we will prove to you why our happiness is more accessible on our side. The reason why you value relationships, or whatever you have with your father or your mother or whatever you have with your girlfriend, the reason why you value it because you know the emotional turmoil you will go through, or the emotional turmoil you have gone through when things were bad, when you necessarily didn't go through when you went through a breakup, when your father was not talking to you. You value those relationships because you felt horrible when those things happened, and when those things are not happening right now, that's why you necessarily feel bad. Why this happiness is unique on our side and not there on their side? Because if you every single time emotionally distant yourself, you don't feel horrible about it. You don't suffer. If you don't suffer, if you're not at your lowest of the lows, you cannot really appreciate what you're going through the life. The fact that I have a girlfriend, the reason why I appreciate the fact that I have a girlfriend, because when I was single or when I was going through a breakup, my life was shit. If my life would not have been shit, I would not have felt so great about having a girlfriend, or the fact that I necessarily want to walk towards a relationship to maintain it and to avoid a breakup. The reason I want to walk through it because I know how shit a breakup feels, and that's why you necessarily have to work towards to feel bad. Why is this unique? Because this is the most accessible way of you getting happiness in this world. Because every single thing which they talk about getting happiness is non-accessible. Because this looks like material wealth. If you cannot value your family and your relationships, the way you get happiness is by your own career aspirations or your own material aspirations. The fact that you want to go to a world tour, or the fact that you want to buy a house, or the fact that you want to become an investment banker in Goldman Sachs. All of those things are necessarily inaccessible for multitudes of reasons. The first thing to know, because necessarily capitalism and the competition is extremely high, which means that if one person wins, 99 loses. But secondly, there is no limit to those aspirations. So even if you get into a job which you necessarily like, you still want to do something which is far better than that. Which means that there is a hedonic treadmill to this, right? Which is to say there is no point of stopping to this. If you have an Audi, you want to buy a fucking Lamborghini. But secondly and more importantly, there are external barriers to this happiness. It's harder for you if you are a woman. It's harder for you if you are a black person. It's harder for you if you are a Dalit person. All of those external barriers of entry also exist for material happiness. But lastly and more importantly, the lottery of birth controls how much material wealth you have initially to get this access of happiness. What does this prove to you? We prove to you our happiness is far more accessible because you value relationships, because you cannot emotionally distant away from it. The reason why you value relationships is because it's hard to get, and the fact that you believe it's hard to get on our world because you necessarily feel shit when it's not available to you. Secondly, why do we make sure that people and individuals are far more better off, and even if you want to make meaningful relationships, why are much better to talk about it? There are patterns in human beings which they don't learn in their paradigm. Because you do not self-evaluate relationships on their paradigm, because you have to emotionally look at those relationships, and at the worst you have to feel what I did was extremely wrong, and that's when I necessarily lost someone. So even if you are able to detect that on their paradigm, you don't work on it because you don't know the value of that. So for example, if you're an extremely emotionally unavailable person and extremely cold-hearted as a person, I would not work towards it if I don't know the ramifications of it. In our world, the ramification is that my mother is pissed at me. The ramification is that I cannot meaningfully make a relationship with a girl. All of those reasons mean that because I'm cold-hearted and because I cannot that meaningfully make a relationship, that is something which is extremely hurtful for them. In their world, you fucking pop a pill, and that is exactly why you do not value or work towards making sure that you are a better person as a whole. Before I move on, why do we match far better in terms of being pure?
Does this pill also erase memory?
No, but you necessarily know that this person exists and this is what happened. But every single thing we have talked about based on the evaluation of events, which necessarily takes an emotional toll on you, that cannot happen if you are not emotionally connected to that person. But thirdly and more importantly, why our alternatives work? Their argument to our alternative is, look, it's fucking expensive. We agree. It's a mitigation. It's getting better. And that's important because it proves the inexclusivity of this pill existing itself. Because if their only problem statement is that, look,
abusive relationships are bad, we already proved to you why it's hard to get out of abusive relationship on both sides. But secondly and more importantly, it's also inexclusive because there are multiple other ways like therapy and everything else which allow you to get towards abusive relationships, which means that their metric itself is inexclusive in this round. What however is exclusive is two things. First, the accessibility towards happiness. So we are far more accessible towards happiness because it's not dependent upon material wealth and extreme random luck which people face in their day-to-day lives. But secondly and more importantly, we are far better in terms of making human beings better because the self-reflection part can only happen if you feel extremely horrible about it, if you have to work towards hard about it, if you feel it is something which is valuable. Both of these things necessarily mean that we are able to access happiness based on family and relationships which are far more accessible than everyone. But secondly, we are able to work towards issues which doesn't allow you to get that happiness. On both these things, this doesn't happen on their part. For them to prove, they have to prove why abuse is something which is exclusively developed on their side and why pill is the only way to solve it.
I'm less likely to do it again simply because I know that like it took me so long to get over him in the first place. Which then means, and this
is what Chandra tells you in the first speech, right? That my ability to trust again massively increases because suddenly I am aware of the fact that it won't take me so long. Two things go south, it will not take me that long to get over it. I think that's why it does the 5 stages of grief that they talk about are actually detrimental to future impacts. Because if I know that it took me 5 years to get over it, I'm unlikely to go into future relationships because you know what, I can't spend another 5 years of my life depressed on the couch again. I need to get back into it. This is especially true when it comes to leaving a situation that you've been financially dependent on the person, where I don't have no option but to get off the couch and but to get working, but to be productive from day one. Because you know what, I've left my abusive husband, but my kids are dependent on me. I need a social circle, I need a family circle. I need a way to get out of it, right? So then understand, right? At a point in time, what I've clarified to you already, that this is not memory erasure. You at no point in time forget why something went south. Which is to say, if I'm the reason why it fucked up, if someone else is the reason it fucked up, I will not repeat those patterns again because I don't necessarily forget the action that they did, right? And objectively, I know that this action led me to taking the pill, which led me to then going ahead and getting over it, right? The only thing that's then gone is the emotional fuck aboutery that happened in my head when it comes to how I process what happened to me. I think that is much better on our side of the house, right? I'll take it in bed. But then all this idea of material benefits, right? And how suddenly material benefits become a source of happiness. How, bro? There are a lot more mechanization that's required to prove to me why suddenly, because I think it's dependent on largely on the assumption that you just don't feel emotions at all, which is in no way true. Emotionally distancing yourself from one person doesn't mean that I don't feel emotions at all. So I don't see why material goods like a Lamborghini just becomes an alternative because it's not like I'm a vampire and it's my off switch and I just won't have any emotions at all, right? But then I also think that if it's so bad to a point where my drive for a Lambo is just inhibiting my entire life, I just fucking won't want a Lambo. My parents will intervene, therapy will come in, and I'll just therapize myself out of it. But understand then why therapy is not a likely alternative. One, I think it's just too fucking expensive. I think when this is accessible, is a much likely alternative. Understand now, even if they love therapy so much, therapy is not cheaper on our side of the world because suddenly there's something to compete to. Right now, therapy is the only thing I can get to my emotion satisfaction. Now I have something to compete to that's $1. So it's $1,000 of therapy versus $1 bill. Suddenly therapy actually has an incentive to become cheaper, which unfortunately sounds quite doesn't, right? But then on this idea of emotional unavailability, right? I think emotional unavailability actually gets better on our side of the house insofar as it's no longer an excuse for someone to say that I'm emotionally unavailable because my ex fucked me over. Yeah, so then take the pill, no. So it doesn't become an excuse for men to come in and tell me that I'm emotionally unavailable because my ex fucked me up and now I can't give you commitment because whatever. Because suddenly it's just you have the excuse you could have taken the fucking pill. Which then means that the burden for emotional unavailability falls on those who are emotionally unavailable. Much better on our side, relationships are just so much more better on our side. Take up your
Memories in isolation have no value unless and until you have a momentum to act which comes via emotion, rage, and
then I think you're really underplaying the power of emotions, right? And I don't see why it's so important for me to go through these emotions in the first place. If memory itself is not a wrong, then why is it so important for me that I should have these in the first place? Right? If memory is not enough, why is it important for me to remember the fact that a father has so much value in status quo, right? We think that's what happens. When you take emotional distance, you forget the memories that this person had in terms of the fact that they gave birth to you or whatever, right? So I don't think that they can come in and play on this sort of arbitrary dynamic that emotions, memory need emotions to be valuable because we proved to you enough why emotions necessarily don't lead to the best outcomes that they necessarily present us to provide, right? In terms of then this idea that you become better by going through pain, I don't buy that because I think even if you're an abuser, the fact that you have emotional ties with the person means you're more likely to then go ahead and justify your abuse, which is to say that it's okay if I beat my daughter, I just wanted the best for her, she's my daughter, it's my job as a parent to beat her just because she's making a bad decision, right? At that point in time, I think when there is some emotional distance, you have a likelihood to realize that okay, beating up anyone is bad, why am I beating my daughter just because she's my daughter, right? So the propensity for people to become better is a lot better on our side because the minute that we get objectivity and you don't allow stupid things like emotions to fucking justify abuse. What is our substantive case? There is no engagement, by the way, on this whole idea of polarization and solidarity. Too late for people to come in and say that. Sobis told you explicitly why he speaks to a certain level of solidarity within women itself, in terms of the fact that they now have clarity that I don't have to be a good wife, I don't have to be a good daughter, I can just be a good human and understand when things are fucking me up. No engagement, too late for people to come in that. Our entire analysis as to why media and pop culture is better off no engagement today. Now this whole idea of how oppression is systematic and how impact hurt gets taken away, no engagement, really too late for them to state their case at this point. In terms of alternatives, therapy really, is that working for anyone in status quo? I don't think so. I think the reason that this debate is happening is because therapy fails, no. And then the ability to retrust people, ability to have faith, ability to just be a better human increases with that curve.
उसका होगा नहीं तो मेरा होगा कॉल कर लेंगे
When do human beings feel sad? It is when there is a sense of lack of something. It is when there is a sense of deprived in your everyday, otherwise normal and human life. This is why you feel sad about losing your school place, that childhood sweetheart, because she is the one who truly understood you. This is why you feel sad after being assaulted, because you miss the happiness of being able to roam freely whenever you wanted, whatever time you wanted, and things like that. You need an impetus to feel sad. You need an impetus similarly to work and evaluate something that's in the past. Note, going back and revisiting a breakup is huge emotional work, and thinking about it on the daily is a huge emotional work. If the pill is so effective, the likely counterfactual is that it just becomes a speck of dust in the vast array of memories that you have. You never have an incentive to revisit those things because that's the easiest out for you at any given point of time. I don't have any clue why you would revisit them. They say the clue is self-correcting mechanisms, right? It is to correct yourself. Right? We think a couple of things. A, they never explain how you are going to feel towards that person once you take the pill. You are going to question yourself, and you're going to question your rationale, and you're going to question how did we become so close in the first place, that my entire life just lead up to this moment so that this person could manipulate me into this position. There is no solvency that you still have with the person. And why is the solvency important? Because by their own characterization, this is someone who was extremely important to you. This can be your parent, this can be your ex-partner, and things like that. That's why we think the impetus of change never ever exists. The second thing that they say is, oh, we don't need to, and let's just agree with this for a moment, that on our side of the house there is labor of expensive therapy, on their side of the house they wouldn't have to undergo any of these things. There are a couple of reasons why this doesn't work. A, you take this pill in the most severe of instances, because by their own admission, if you go to class every day and if you are not torn between the fact that you should have broken up or not, that means you are not mentally ready for such a damning irreversible decision to take place in your life, because you constantly question if I am giving up on something that is once in a lifetime opportunity at any given point of time. We think you have to be extremely clear in your fucking head if you want to take this decision or not. If you have reached that level of clarity, you would opt out on both sides, because you have it's fucking insane how clear it looks to you, how clear good and bad is finally appearing to you. If that level of clarity is reached, we think you would opt out in both instances. I don't know why that becomes the tripping point. But the next thing that they say is that other emotions and interactions around you still exist. So it's quite unclear, and this is where I segue to our positive case, it's quite unclear why I need this set of positive emotions or negative emotions to make me value life. A couple of things. Normally, there is no impetus for you to take a reset and look at life from a broader view because of how many things are happening on a daily basis. Resetting your life emotionally and mentally is a huge thing, and there needs to be a huge impetus which forces you to do this at any given point of time. So positive emotions and interactions are not going to have that kind of an effect. They have the reverse effect. That is to say, if I win this trophy today, then the most likely effect is not that I'm grateful for this team, that I should take this team to Worlds, like or UADC and things like that. Because my hedonic treadmill will never end. Because I feel that I'm capable of this and I'm deserving of this. But when I lose and I don't know, for whatever reason for my own fuck up, that is when I try to zoom out, and that is when I realize that there are a lot of other things that matter beyond this bubble of debating. That is the impetus that is created on our side of the house, which is a consequence of pure negative emotions. Positive emotions create a hedonic treadmill, which is something that they never engage with. But I want to take the best case here, right? I think the best case is that you take this pill constantly and everything is okay on your side of the house. You never enter that situation of grief. So you live life from happy periods to happy periods to happy periods to happy periods. That is what they're saying. I think this is bad on 3 levels. A, when you continuously see your life changing, but you not growing as a person, you are going to feel incredibly bad. But a couple of things, right? A, why you won't feel yourself changing? Because you chase the same things that you used to chase 10 years ago. And why is that? Because you never got to actually going there and realizing that things, right? If someone is having fun playing with puppies and I'm like, wow, what a beautiful experience. Maybe I also want to feel so empathetic one day that I find happiness in the smallest of things. We think if you take this pill and if there is no way that you can go ahead and zoom out and look at these small happinesses in life, I think be like even when you take the pill and the reset happens, you go ahead and keep chasing the same things over and over again. I have no clarity on the side of the house why the impetus to go ahead and chase something else occurs. But secondly, we think what you chase is something that's innately materialistic at any given point of that time, right? They say that this is not exclusive on their side of the house, this is something symmetric, capitalism applies symmetrically. We think people want to opt out of capitalism because of how strenuous it is, because of how difficult it is to go ahead and cope up with the expectations that everyone puts on you on a daily basis. That is why we debate. That is why we go ahead and choose to spend our weekends on things that we like, instead of going ahead and working that extra weekend, like weekday, like work and things like that. That means that what exactly happens is, like, because life is so tough and because these cultural reset and those kinds of things happen, that's why we are able to like zoom out and take a look at these things. On your side of the house, that doesn't happen. But lastly, we think it's just bad because there is going to come a point of realization where you feel that you're a slave to the pill, where you feel that you have surrendered your agency to something so external, to something so like arbitrary that you cannot objectively think without this. This is incredibly bad, and the analysis is incredibly simple because this is the analysis of addiction. A, we think you lose meaning of life, or you fail to go ahead and view life after a certain extent because you feel that if anything goes wrong, well, there is no point of aspiring big because I can keep revisiting this pill whenever I want, wherever I want, and things like that. But secondly, this addiction is bad because it makes you grow farther from the people who care about you and the people who can possibly bring you out of these things at any given point of time. Because this becomes the goal, like the end point of all your interactions and things like that. But lastly, even if I agree on that, even if I don't think that this analysis is relevant, and even if I think that what they're saying is true, in terms of we would like to have a society where we live still in primitive structures, where people chase materialism, and why that's good. We think just on utility, that's not as good. Because the number of people who are able to actualize the utility, or the meaning of their lives on your side of the house, are incredibly less because of how restrictive the structures are and how we have defined them. On our side of the house, when there is cultural reset, we think a far more number of people, or just on scale, a lot more people are able to access what they set out to achieve at any given point of time. So just on the number of people affected, we think that we're able to help these people out. But secondly, the strongest thing that then remains on their side is vulnerable people and whatnot. You don't ever prove what is the inflection point of them reconsidering this decision. But secondly, you never engage with the fact that taking this pill means losing all emotional connection and wanting to stop caring about this thing at any given point of time. For all those reasons.
Alright, I'll start. How do you evaluate this? The first thing you evaluate on is important note on happiness is that things which are available to us just abundantly do not make you happy. The fact that you have a toothpaste at your home is not something you wake up and get, I have a toothpaste, I'm really happy about this. You are probably happy that your girlfriend texted good morning. I think the comparative is that we are happy about things which are extremely hard to find. The reason why you evaluate relationships and put them at a pedestal is extremely important to you only in our world, because you know what the absence of it looks like. And that's the first premise we have pushed since Lavanya's speech. How they have engaged to this. The first thing they have said is that we are okay with trading of the small term happinesses for the because there are other ways in which you can get long term and big happinesses and big sources of happiness. The first rebuttal we had this is that it's extremely inaccessible for the bunch of reasons we gave you throughout the benches. The first thing we just said is that one, like there's just lottery of birth and so on, but two, this is just inaccessible because of multitudes of external factors which exist between us and the ideas of competition. And the fact that you're never satisfied because of this. Why is this necessarily important? Because this shows a unique way of happiness which only exists in our side because you uniquely evaluate this. The response to this then is that, look guys, you are still objectively looking at these relationships. From the three speeches we have explained that objectively looking at it doesn't really mean that you fix your ways, but more importantly evaluate it to an extent that it takes you on an emotional turmoil. Because it cannot, because you're looking at it emotionally, because you're emotionally distant to the person and the issue that it brought up, because you emotionally cannot relate to that, because you can emotionally not value to it. That is why you do not provide utility to that relationship or utility to the idea that you have to fix yourself to fix this problem, because you can always pop a pill and fucking move on. I think at that time you are not able to fix yourself. You're stuck in a cycle of vicious path where you're making the same mistakes again and you are not making meaningful relationships. The second idea which they have, and the broadly debate of this, is the idea of victims. How do victims react to this? The first thing we point out, that if it's about a physical relationship which is extremely abusive, you necessarily, this is just symmetric on both sides. Because you are emotionally already distant from the person, you want to escape. The reason why you are not able to escape is because of societal burdens, because of financial issues and so on. That becomes symmetric anyway. But even if the person is so manipulated that they are able to emotionally capture you, you are always at crossroads. So, not every single person knows that taking a pill is irreversible. So if you are not sure you should emotionally distance this person, or the idea that, look, I can fix him, I think at that time you necessarily do not know if you should take the pill or not. This is problematic for two key reasons. One, it's just non-starter, right? You don't know if it's the right decision or not. Neither do they, which means that the irreversibility becomes an issue. So even if you after poured this pill and you still have memories, you still have regret that if I did the right thing or not, if things could have gone better, what would have happened then? So when the utility of this person decreases because of this confusion, we solve that because we allow you to evaluate this and do not have an easy way out. Because therapy takes time and we admit it does, it allows you to evaluate all your options and go through all stages of grief, which allows you to look at the particular scenario extremely properly. Last response to this is, guys, therapy doesn't work. Maybe not, but currently, it's probably getting more and more accessible. The idea is simple, that it's something which is mitigated, right? Which is to say that it's something which is not exclusive to their side. We are able to deal with people who have gone through abuse. We are able to deal with people who have gone through trauma. This is not something which they uniquely deal with. However, what we uniquely deal with is two things. One, the idea of happiness in a world which is extremely competitive, which is extremely hard to be successful in, which is extremely stuck in an idea that I want more. But secondly, we make sure that people self-evaluate themselves to find more meaningful relationships. Because you are not able to do that, you are stuck in the same mistakes and the same patterns. And that's why you are not able to find a life in which you have utility.
But that's fine. Two things, two responses, understanding freedom. A, on the idea of the hedonic treadmill, right? I think we've been fairly consistent. We've said that not everyone is as irrational as saying, oh, I did get a Lamborghini, so now I'm going to just suddenly take the pill. I think we've substantially set in terms of metric who are the people against whom most likely you're supposed to take this pill. Like we're set out these sort of alternatives in these situations in which you're most likely to take this pill. Like they really do not understand that. But when let's be extremely charitable to their case and say, oh, you know what, yes, that is in fact the case. Tell us why is it wrong if I can simply move away all my problems by taking one pill. This is exactly the simplistic push that government has been asking. But I think Op's case would have worked very well if you could have only taken the pill once. But no, the idea that you can take the pill of n number of times, whether it be for material pushing for people away, I think is one that still stands on government, that you need not go under through that massive amounts of pain that necessarily is going to fuck you up in life, set you back for 10, 12, 15 years, and that is because they're ultimately arriving at the same outcome, right? And this is exactly Tanasha's speech. The same outcome is A, now you're a perfect person, now you can look at life X, Y, and Z. Those are the sort of responses like we really get no clarity about. But also I think the erasure of memory, we ask this in the POI is really important, right? I think you still know what gave you happiness. I think you still remember the good parts in life and like you know what are the objective wrongs that has happened. It's just that you don't associate that person with giving you that happiness or that sadness. What this contemplates in terms of your ability to speak up against your abusers is so massive, zero engagement to that. So now if my father was wrong to me, I know as a male he did something objectively wrong to me, but I'm no more held back by the idea and sentiment, oh he's my father and I need to have like some sort of like refrain or restrict with this idea. Zero engagement on that idea. But also like what this translates into larger community politics, or like politics with like women feeling this solidarity, marginalized communities feeling this solidarity across like ways and barriers and really like figuring it out. Oh, in fact this is the politicization of things, right? The idea that it is no more society telling me that it's my inherent duty as a good woman, as a bad woman, as a good wife, and like the mental torment that I've always been feeling in my head, oh am I a bad wife if I go into that? I can simply take this away, I can simply push it away by taking this pill. Simplistic case, zero engagement, zero responses. But Daniel, I think they also don't, I think one of the central pushes is people don't know what is correct for them, and which is why they really need to go through the entire life cycle of grief to really understand. But if 35 years have gone in tackling one divorce, what life is there left to live? Please think about it. But also secondarily, I think this is really important, right? I think you can also learn from the experiences of others as well as your own memory. So your friend has gone through a painful breakup, you objectively know, evaluate and associate what has happened. So you know that danger, bad relationships look like this, I'm not supposed to do that. So even if that rage momentum that you somehow so loud is absent when I at the house, learning from the experience of others, your own memory and the idea that your sense of justice is not quashed, your sense of self is not quashed, very much existing a self of preservation, how that looks like, gives you enough impetus on the side of the house to not engage in these repetitive behaviors again and again. But I think there's one idea which is like really interesting and like, okay, anti-capitalism we've done, but sure, I really don't understand how is this like anti-capitalism in any sense. Okay, but let's really understand. They say it will all become ultimately a speck of dust and you will really not look at life in the way in which you were supposed to. See, this is the problem. If you were a white philosopher who had tens and thousands of acres of estate and only one problem to deal with, perhaps you could do this. But think about people who are under an immediate urgency to stand back on their feet up in order to tackle life, in order to survive in a world like this. I think this is exactly the option here that we presented you. That when things are so dire, when things are in short outcomes, when life is very unpredictable, how is that you want to spend those n number of years that you have? Do you want to enter into that unlimited verbosity of, oh, rage momentum, therapy in 10 years, next 10 years, or really want to access the direct benefits which at no point in time have the challenge? And really we are unable to understand that why that we can only enjoy life if you've seen the bad things, when the experiential learning, things like that, learning from the experience of others, things like that are around. But Daniel, I really want to say this last thing, I know it could be a bit controversial. Think about some things, right? Who does this debate benefit the most or hurt the most, or like X, Y, and Z? It is those who are under a compulsion to forget, who really need to forget but are unable to forget. If that means that some rich fuck millionaire who thinks Lamborghini is a genuine need in life pops the pill, so it may, until and unless the person who really needs it, women, minorities, and people who really need it can do that. No problem.
टोकन इज नील दिखा रहा है. What the fuck?
बंद करना आप बंद कर दो पूरा.
क्या
आप
रिकॉर्डिंग उठ तो नहीं आएगा? अभी यूट्यूब पे रिकॉर्ड होता है ना, जो लाइव स्ट्रीम रहता है ऑटोमेटिकली, तो ऐप अगर ऐसे क्लोज करते पटास से तो
नहीं
होगा रिकॉर्ड. टोकन स्कूल पे दिखा रहा है, गूगल पे सर्च करके देखो. मेरा फ़ोन लाओ, है
ये भी रिकॉर्ड
वाला. there's no other